Speaking for Calcutta University, for the motion, Arghya Basu. Arghya is doing his master's in English. He's an avid fan of Hindi film songs. He reads Bangla Upannash, and he spends his free time, doing freelance photography. Arghya Basu speaking for the motion.
Good evening. It's always very difficult to come up to the stage from a penultimate group of speakers. All your weapons are exposed and you don't know what actually to do. So I'll try to make it interesting. I think personally that this motion is a bit confusing, you know? I mean, social networking is a failure of communication. If social networking only means Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, then no. Social networking definitely is a failure of communication, but it's not like that, as Shoujo rightly pointed it out. Etymologically, the word communication comes from the Latin word communis. It means to share. To share something, you need a medium. In a social networking website, this medium, I think they definitely meant social networking website by social networking. Not the way to confuse others. So I personally believe that in a social networking website, this medium works in a twofold structure. Firstly, as your vehicle of representation, you have languages, snaps, sounds, and a digitized ground. It actually affects the transmutability of what actually is supposed to be conveyed or shared. Expression has always been very important in the way of communication. Now, the major constraint that social networking sites face is the lack of expression. They have some codified emoticons and abbreviations for expression, as in ROFL, LOL, LMAO. Now, when being amused by a Facebook or a Twitter post, or not Twitter post, Orchid post, you write LOL or ROFL or LMAO, it doesn't mean that you are actually banging your head against the wall laughing. People don't even know what LOL mean and they keep on writing it. I don't know. Nextly, expression with words form a cohesive whole to actually kiss the closest proximity of meaning. Take an example. Imagine that your best friend is ringing you for a very long time, and somehow you're not being able to answer. And then you leave him a text that, "I'm extremely sorry," with a sad emoticon, immediately followed by his reply, "It's fine," with a smiley. Now, "it's fine" with a smiley definitely means a hell lot. It's full with multidimensional meanings attached to it. It can mean that it's absolutely fine for him. It can also mean that he's indifferent. It can also mean that you better get lost. Keeping in mind the coherence theory of realism, thanks to Mr. Plato, twice, thrice, quattro time moved from reality, I've been hearing. So, the coherence theory of realism talks about the intuitive perception of reality. If there is anything called real, that we feel through our sensory organs. Social networking constantly drags us away from this intuitive perception. You know, we cannot understand things properly. You post a photo in Facebook, you have 93 likes, sitting in your armchair scrolling through your Facebook while you feel like, oh, I'm going to be the next Kevin Carter. It's not like that. In the universe, Facebook is actually providing you a counterpart of it, a virtual world. A virtual world that is very confusing, that is giving birth to a sense of escapism. You are running away from senses, from people. Though, what you try to do is to create an intellectually, socially, and conjugally compatible world, and therein lies the incompatibility of these networking sites. Seeing someone online in a chat window and pinging him hi is far more difficult than standing right in front of him, facing him tete-a-tete and asking him, how are you? I readily accept the certain fact that in this globalized world, social networking has its own importance. Its advent is pretty obvious. But what we are losing is the rhetoric of language, the multifaceted structure of social networking usage. A social networking site is like standing amidst a crowd and shouting at the peak of your voice, making people understand that, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And to do that, you actually run away from your true identity. You create a falsified picture of your own self. Umberto Eco, in his famous fiction, The Name of the Rose, the very beginning lines, wrote, in the beginning was the Word, and Word was with God, and Word was God. Courtesy Nietzsche, if God is dead, so is Word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to Arghya? Yes?
So within your speech, you mentioned, I'm trying to call a friend, and I can't get through to them, so I text them. Now, by very that, you admit that classic communications have its limitations, and I would propose to you that if you have no other way of getting through to your friend, if the only way is calling them, they don't pick up, you're far more likely to assume they're ignoring you, they don't want to talk to you, things like this, than if you have a way of Facebooking them saying, are you busy right now? It allows other forms of communication, as you proved within your own speech, surely.
Yeah. I mean, what am I supposed to answer?
Or do you not believe that do you not believe that your own speech conceded that we need other forms of communication, such as Facebook?
No, need of communication has always been there. I'm talking about understanding. I'm talking of the failure of communication. The failure of communication essentially talks about the meaning that you convey. Communication always meant that to share it perfectly. Now, it's not possible to share perfectly without communicating the right way. Now, Facebooking definitely gives you a sense, but emoticon cannot give you a proper response because human response has always been a sphere and domain of experiment. You always come up with newer expressions. You never know how to excavate it.
Thank you, Arghya. Arghya's talk about abbreviations on the social media reminded me of a real-life experience I had some years ago when my son was on Facebook and I, somewhat unannounced, walked into the room. He was communicating with about 38 other people who were live on Facebook at that time, and I noticed him writing the words capital P, capital O, capital P. And then within a few seconds, on top appeared number of people who were live on Facebook, 0. And this occurred in a few seconds. When I asked him what POP stood for, thinking like most unsuspecting fathers do, that this was an abbreviation, American slang for a father, he said, yes, that's what it is. 2 years later, I was in the United States, and a colleague of mine, who's a lady neurosurgeon, took me to her house, and her daughter was on Facebook. And she had a lot of chats open. And as soon as her mother took me in, again I noticed those words, capital P, capital O, capital P being printed, and suddenly all those friends on Facebook shut down. I couldn't but help wonder, being a man of science, that there was some correlation, and POP couldn't have been a slang for father when it was a mother who entered the room. And the first thing I came back, and I accosted my son. And I don't know whether you're aware of this word POP, but in one of those very rare moments of teenage candidness, he told me, POP stands for Parents on the Prowl. And that made me understand the whole relevance of social media that we don't understand as parents of the current generation.